We'll be waiting 2 more minutes for the other 20 and coffee lessons. If you actually respect 3 more minutes, we will start. We will start. Right, seeing as the third training user here and the 5 minutes have elapsed, you will proceed directly to the debate. Welcome everyone to ASDC 2014 round 3. On the motion, this helps to prevent dating websites and apps from allowing users to specify their racial preferences. We have incumbent Catholic I 1. And in opposition, Ateneo 3. Right. So, without any further ado, I'd like to call the House to order and invite Prime Minister to take the floor. The motion stands in the here.
Mr. Speaker, sir, on today's motion on this House will prevent dating websites and apps from allowing users to specify their racial preference, that our side government is completely for it. Why dating website and why apps? We thought that right now, when social media is on the blue, where everybody either owns an iPhone or is on Facebook or are on dating websites, that discourse will happen when discussion happens over which kind of race you prefer to date. That is very detrimental, because when that happens, discrimination is clearly happening. So what is our stance today? Today, our burden from side government is to prove that by allowing racial preference to exist on social media, it's going to create even more problem. It's going to create even more harm than it does to good. And with that, the government should definitely take a step, go in front and tell people that this cannot happen. And how is the government going to do that? The government is going to do that by allowing dating websites, social media sites to have 2 months to get their users, to inform their users that you cannot put up your racial preference anymore. And if you do, it is considered illegal and we can charge you under the law. And the government is also going to educate its people on why when you put up your racial preference on social media, what is the detrimental effects. The government's going to sit down, the government's going to go to every school, the government's going to put it into syllabus to make it a very big deal. Because of racial preference, you have a lot of racial tension. Yes.
So will you then criminalize people who date within the race?
Can you repeat that?
Will you then criminalize people for, say, white men who choose to date white women outside of websites?
No, we won't criminalize them, obviously, because right now, why is it so detrimental that you put it on social media? It's so detrimental to when you put it on social media because you make it a public notice that you don't like something that is such a sensitive matter. And with that, let me go into my 2 points today. That is the power of social media and the duty of the government. Power of social media. Everybody knows when Donald Sterling went out and told his wife that you cannot allow black men into our house, it was caught on media, it spread like wildfire. Even though he was prosecuted, even though he was condemned again and again and again by people, the hurt was that he psychologically messed up his players' mind. His players felt hurt. Black people felt angry that Donald Sterling, an NBA owner, NBA coach, would actually do that. They felt a very big harm. What do I tell you today? What side government is telling you today is that social media possesses a great power to influence and harm someone psychologically. With social media, it is already, when social media spreads an idea, when social media starts talking on an idea, people are going to gather together and discuss about the idea. People are going to give out their preference, their likes, their dislikes, and when discourse happens, a mutual appreciation of what's happened is going to happen. And we say as government, we cannot allow when that mutual appreciation is over something as bad as racial preference to happen. Because when you are going to start a ban against a certain type of people with a different skin color, example, you are Chinese, and people don't like the fact that you are Chinese, and they're going to band up together and talk bad about you because of that, you're going to feel very bad. We thought that with that, a Ku Klux Klan can happen, and because when people start banding up together and talking bad about you, you're going to have a very bad psychological harm. It's already bad that in a normal day, when you walk over, people may pass a racial comment. It's already bad enough. But when social media jumps on the bandwagon and labels your race because you are born with that certain skin color, it is considered something that they don't like. It is considered something bad that you don't know why it is bad. We tell you it is highly detrimental, and this is why government should take a step and stop it. On my next point, on how it is the duty of the government, side opposition may think that when governments put up this problem on the spotlight, it may be a huge exaggeration. But we tell that yes, that no, it is not an exaggeration, because these problems do exist. Because these problems, even though how small they are, they do have harms, and these problems do exist. They are not an exaggeration. What side government is doing is just pulling this problem up into light, and side government is trying to solve the problems. We tell that when there is a problem, the government should solve it. It is the government's job to make sure that unity and peacefulness happens in a country, no matter how small or how big it is. So as the government, there is already a social contract between the government and the people, right? So the people pay taxes to the government, the people vote for the government. That is why the government's out there. And because of that, the government is holding a very big burden in order to protect the people from what they're doing, no matter it is wrong. And we thought that it is perfectly fine for a government to come out and take out your expression of views when it is harming on another people's mind. It is perfectly alright for government to come out and tell you, no, you cannot do that, because what you are saying might psychologically harm someone else, because what you are saying might put another person to depression because of something they have never did wrong. And when that happens, it is very important for a government to step forward and take away that right. And this is how it is, and this is how, and we tell them, like, this is where it is okay for a government to tell you that you cannot do bad things like this, especially on the forms of social media, where news can spread like wildfire, when problems can spread so quickly and you have no time to curb it. Yes, the side opposition may come out and tell us that when the problem is going to come out, people are going to backlash against it. When a wrong comes out, people are going to say bad things about that person, and that wrong will no longer exist anymore because the right will drown that wrong. But we thought that no, it does not happen like that. Even though a lot of people will rally against the bad things that happen, these bad things has already caused a harm. These bad things has already caused a psychological harm that it takes years and years and years to cure. And as a government, side government is doing our job to protect these people. And if you agree that side government should come out and make sure that all these people are protected, go with side government. Thank you.
Great. We thank Prime Minister for her speech. She spoke for 7 minutes and 14 seconds. We would now like to call upon the Leader of Opposition to open the case for side opposition hearing.
A relationship is not just formed through the chat boxes you have or the conversations that you have with different individuals online, but it is solidified with external characteristics that give you the special attraction and special relatability you have with the different individuals that you meet in these websites. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't want to live in the idealistic world that government lives in, where race doesn't matter. Because inevitably, it will exist on either model, that preferences will always exist, that I will always like this race over another, especially if it's someone I want to date, especially if it's someone I may want to have sex with and have a relationship with in the future. And you cannot change that. What their side does is entrench individuals and restrict them from accessing the people that they want and people that they would want to prefer. There's a reason why we call it a preference and not a choice to be racist. Our clash in opposition then is going to be very simple. We want to keep the option to specify your racial preference and say that you prefer this race over this race, in the same way that we allow other preferences, such as your common interests, like you like being a nerd, or such as your common interests, like your own religion, like your own gender, like your own sexual orientation in these websites. And all of these different things are external characteristics that you see in individuals. Moreover, we also support different dating websites like blacksmith.com, where black people can meet with other black people, or where different websites where white people can meet with other white people in these websites, and they do experience a special type of relatability within themselves, or a special community in these different websites. But here's a clarification which government is misrepresented in these dating websites. We're not saying that you can tick a box that says that you are anti-black. We're not saying that you can tick a box that you are anti-white. What we are simply saying in these websites is that you prefer this race, and this is something that you'd rather want to date with, rather than other people which are who are not part of this different preference and this different thing. So yes, it's possible that you can meet with other people. It's just that you're going to give priority to this preference over others, and that's something we're willing to support at opposition. Two arguments. Firstly, on how people have an absolute right to have preferences with the people they want to date. And secondly, on how their policy is going to be ineffective because biases will still exist, because inevitably, I'm still going to meet you in person. Before that, a few rebuttals for the previous speaker. The first thing she told us is that of the power of social media, and this is merely just a characterization, right? Firstly, this completely misrepresented how these sites work, right? You don't say that you hate blacks in these websites, but you say that you like white people. In the same way that you put common interests, like I like playing video games, I like all these different things. And guys, that doesn't mean I'm being racist. It's just that I like this certain group of people, and that doesn't mean I'm going to be racist towards another. Being racist means I'm going to hate them and shame on them whenever I see them. That obviously doesn't happen when I just want to simply date someone that is white or someone that is Filipino in these situations. But moreover, we're not working in a context that black people are really oppressed like in the 1960s, right? It's not like they're being oppressed and being in slavery in these situations. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there are chances of acceptance in these situations, and inevitably, we still have laws that implement that physical abuse is not going to be upon these black people. I just don't see how, just because I want to date someone that is white, another black person is going to be oppressed or going to feel left out. What this merely is an attraction, and you cannot stop me from being attracted to white people. You cannot stop me from being attracted to this specific type of thing, because external characteristics are important to every relationship. Secondly, she talked to us about the government's responsibility, but merely, this is very assumptive because she immediately said that people will suddenly be bad against black people. The government's responsibility is to allow people to be free in who they want to choose. And inevitably, you cannot change my preference just because, or change my mindset and psychology with your policy, because in the real world, I'm still going to be like that. That's exactly where I move on to the first argument. And how people have a right to have preferences with the people they want to date. We think in general, the state allows individuals to have different preferences to different people, and emphasis on the word preferences, right? Because it values them and makes them more relatable with these people, especially when they're in a relationship with them. In the same way that I do it on the basis when I choose people or choose women on the basis of religion, so that when I get in a relationship with her, I can go to mass them, or go to mass together with her, or if I'm going to have a preference for straight people, we can have the same sexuality because, you know, we can like each other in these situations. The fault in their case is that they immediately assume that attraction is the same as prejudice, when it is clearly not. When you look at it, just because I like something doesn't mean I'm racist towards the opposite, right? In the same way, I can still love Muslims even though I'm still going to want to marry a Christian person or a Christian woman in the future. Or, in the same way, if I'm going to want to marry someone that's beautiful, it doesn't mean I'm going to hate all the ugly people in the world, right? Inevitably, external characteristics are still important. Beautiful people are still going to be prioritized in these situations, and we think that's still going to be inevitable in the psychology and mindsets. In the same way, if I'm still going to like white people, then you should still allow me to do so. But moreover, we still concede that probably in some situations there will still be interracial relationships. We're still willing to support that on our side. We just don't see how our policy is going to stop that from happening. It can still happen through different common interests. That's something we're willing to support. But let's nuance the different dating websites. These individuals who have to date and maybe like want to have sex and relationship in the future, and these are people who had to resort to the internet to try to find a partner to hook up with. We think essentially for them, if they can be more relatable with these people in the same way we can live in the common ground with states, with these people, states must respect their right, because in the real world you cannot simply eradicate these preferences. The second argument is much more simpler, and another analysis to the first argument. Biases will still be there in the actual date. Inevitably, dating websites means that I'm going to meet up with you in the future, to hook up so I can meet up with you, maybe have sex with you, maybe have a relationship, maybe develop something between us both. Inevitably, if we're working in a context where people prefer a race over another, you cannot simply just say that just because you take away the tick in the box there, my mindset is going to just change, right? That's obvious. Such that if I'm going to meet someone in the future who had a common interest and I find out that, oh, she's black and I wanted someone that was white, I'm still not going to want to date her in the future. So their policy is extremely ineffective in trying to reach their goal of eradicating racism. I'm still going to have this inevitable type of preference, and you cannot change that. I'm still probably going to be whatever type of attraction to these people have. So for all these reasons and more, because you care about how relationships work and attractions in these situations, I am very proud to oppose.
We thank the Leader of Opposition for his speech. He spoke for 7 minutes and 53 seconds. We now like to call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to further the case for side government here.
It's funny to see that side opposition totally misunderstood our case today. Because as you can see, for around 5 to 6 minutes, what the LO said, all that he said was about how preferences matter. But look, let's review again what side government told you, what our policy is. We are not stopping people from choosing the race of the person they want to date or the person who they want to apparently have sex with. All we're doing, saying, is that look, when you want to use the dating sims, don't explicitly state that you want only black or only white. There is a big difference between these two things. Because all we're telling you is we don't want you to explicitly say and express this view of yours because it can cause racial tension. At the end of the day, the government still allows you to choose what type of person you want to date. Why? Let's take a step back and understand how dating sims function. Because when you go to a dating sim, you can specify many things. One of it is the race. These people usually state, I want to date someone who is only black or someone who is only Chinese. Sometimes they add in, I don't want any other race. That alone is a form of racial discrimination. Even if they just say, I only want a black guy or a black girl, it still is an indirect form of discrimination which people from other races can still feel. Let's look at what else they talked about. They told us that it's the government's responsibility to allow people to choose. As I've told you, we are not stopping people from choosing. Because at the end of the day, when someone maybe wants to hook up with you, maybe someone from another race which you don't really want to date, all you can say is maybe that you say that you don't really have to give a reason. You can just on the dating sim say that, look, maybe I don't really feel that we're going to be compatible to each other, that's why I don't think we should go out. Done. But you don't say that you don't tell the person that I don't want you because of your race. That's the difference. This person can still walk away if he doesn't want that person. Before that, yes.
assumption your side keeps making is assuming that same race couples will automatically be racist. Your preference is not racist, calling someone else to be black is racist. Stop assuming that these couples will automatically be racist.
Sure, this couple may not be racist, but when they state on the dating scene that they only want white, people, even if they didn't mean it, other people can still take it as racial discrimination. They can still take it as they can still think that these people are discriminating against their race, and that is a harm we want to mitigate. They told us that even through our policy, racial discrimination may happen. But look, we've got two different we already told you that we also educate the whole society as to how we should stop racial discrimination and tell them that racial profiling is bad. Sure, even this may be a small step. There may be still discrimination, but at least the state now is taking one small step at a time in reducing discrimination. We heard from this policy, even though it doesn't prevent discrimination as a whole, we can still reduce discrimination. Now let's look at our two ideas today. Firstly, will this harm the choices of the users? Because that's what they were kind of asphyxiated on, that our policy will harm the users of dating websites' choice. We tell you it would not harm their choice at all. Why? Because the government is not forcing you to marry or to date someone from another race. We still allow you to choose the race of the person you want to date. The only difference here is that we don't want you to explicitly state on that dating website that you want this certain race. As I told you earlier in my speech, if let's say this white guy only wants a Chinese girl, but this white girl comes up and says, hey, maybe we should go out for a date. He can just say, no, I don't think we're compatible, and therefore just reject that application. From there, this racial discrimination already cannot happen because you don't explicitly show that you're against the race. We tell you that at the end of the day, if you don't like them, you can still walk away, and at the end, and after a while, if you finally meet that girl you want, we still allow you to go date the girl before the NEPIs.
That proposal just concedes to the idea that all our parties are present in your country and still choose the race you want.
Yes, you can choose the race you want. But as what we told you, our PM has already explicitly told you the harms when you state that of your racial preference on the website itself. By allowing you to walk away, it's not a form of racial discrimination. Why? Because all you're saying is that I don't think we're compatible, done. Under their policy, racial discrimination further happens because you're allowed to say that you only want this race. Our policy stops that. Our policy stops other users from seeing the racial profiling, the racial discrimination that other users have, whether it be indirectly or directly, as I've told you. But let's look at the second slide on the message to society. What happens under their policy? The users, yes, at the end of the day, this racial discrimination, this racial profiling will still continue because, as we can see, even though the user did not intend to discriminate against other race, his mere statement of "I only want a white person" can already be taken as racial discrimination against by other people. So what do these people feel then? That the government doesn't even want us to take a step in extending its policies, its duty of stopping racial discrimination and thereby creating more harmony towards the society. What are the harms? Because as I've told you, even though that person didn't mean it, other people will still take it as racial profiling, and these people who felt that they were discriminated against, there will be a lasting psychological harm, and to the worst case, a physical harm. We've already given you an example of Donald Sterling as to how under his case, even though he was condemned, lots of people felt this insult psychologically. But let's look at what happens under our policy. It shows that the government is taking a stand against discrimination, against racial profiling. The government still shows that we still allow, as much as we allow you to choose who you want to date, we don't want you to explicitly state your choices and causing any risk of a harm of racial discrimination. The benefit is there will be less discrimination taken into account. And what happens is now that we teach people not to judge people based on their skin color. So for all these reasons, go with side government.
We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his speech. Spoke for 7 minutes and 27 seconds. Now we'd like to call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to further take your side of opposition here.
Living in a world that calls a relationship between a black man and a black woman illegal is simply absurd. We tell you that the state barely operates by telling you that you are racist until you actually show them that you are racist to begin with. Let's clarify two very fatal things that happen in government side. One, there's this fatal assumption from them that just because I date someone from the same race as me, I will automatically be a supremacist for my race. We think it's fairly unfair for them to homogenize same-race couples and say that they will be that racist when they themselves said that currently we already have trends of people not being entrenched in these racial ideologies to begin with. Because people aren't as that discriminatory as you think they are. Second clarification. Let's talk about what racial discrimination is. Because according to them, racial discrimination is stating that I prefer dating white women over black women. No, racial discrimination is telling you that you are shit because of your race. Racial discrimination is telling you that I will not interact with you because of your race. Simply stating a preference is not an absolute choice. That particular link to preferences is something they still fail to recognize. I have one very simple case for you. My case for you is going to be how it reduces couples of the same races to already be a form of racism. But before that, a couple of rebuttals to the previous speaker. Let's divulge into the principal aspect of the debate. Because coming from the Prime Minister, you got this argument on the power of social media, the idea of it being spread on wildfire, and the idea of preference being discriminatory. Firstly, again, stop working under the assumption that they are already automatically racist. This is where we have to delineate their matter on Donald Sterling. Donald Sterling literally was proven to be racist already. That statement was already targeted of that particular race and was already criminalized. Our side conversely tells you that we can't assume people are automatically racist just for a particular preference. So that's why their matter on Donald Sterling fails. So the second level of response is even if they can be racist to begin with, it's an argument that creates a golden standard for what human relationships would be, which is very unlikely for the state to do. Because we recognize that we allow you to have superficial relationships. We recognize that your relationships can be as complex, but it is important for state not to impose a particular standard. In their case, that's inter-race relationships. Our principal case was very good. It was the idea of your absolute right to preference. The only response you get coming from the previous speaker is this idea that it's merely a statement that is already bad. First response, should we then ban opinions that hurt other people? We see it within a democracy that's not necessarily true because of your right to expression to begin with. We think your racial preference is just a particular extension of that. Let's take a look at the second aspect of rebuttal. Let's deal with the pragmatic issues in this debate. Because we get this very robotic argument coming from government side on the duty of government, the idea of social contract to mitigate third-party harm. To which you say, firstly, again, stop assuming that every white couple is a racist and at the point of harming people outside their race. You politicize human relationships, and that's particularly harmful because you already entrenched them to the idea of discrimination. But the second level of response is this. Even if these couples become racist, that's why these acts are still criminalized under anti-discriminatory laws. Stop already criminalizing them before they actually be racist. Stop assuming that people are that simple and stop oversimplifying human psyche. That's why it was so important for Luigi to give your argument that prejudice will always exist. Something the previous speaker never responded to. It was the idea of assuming the mechanism of them just meeting up randomly without knowing the race. When you see that person on that particular table of that restaurant, you will get appalled because that prejudice will not get removed just because you tell them that they can't have a preference on their website because it's something entrenched within their minds that they cannot simply discount.
Next, let's rebut their model, because we think that their model is incredibly contradicting. Because you know it's going to be illegal for you to date someone of the same racial preference if it's on a website. But coming from my point earlier, they say it's perfectly fine for you to date someone of the same race as long as you don't use a website. We think that if we want to be hardline and consistent, it's not fair for them to contradict their own model. Next, this argument coming from the depth, the whole idea that you're allowed them to walk away anyways. Firstly, that's unfair to reason us with that because you're just conceding to all the harms that can happen to our side when you accuse us, because it can fairly happen to your side as well. Secondly, even if walking away concedes all the harm that are present, we still have to recognize that we can't label you as racist before you actually do something that is racist to begin with. Before my argument goes.
Okay, what we say, for example, is that you just said, we did not say that you cannot date someone from the same race. All we are saying is that you just cannot say that statement which may be considered discriminatory by other people, even if you didn't intend to.
Firstly, then why did you profit as something as illegal? We think that it's unfair for you to say that it's going to be illegal by you telling you that you can still date other people from other races as well when you have a model that that calls these relationships illegal. Secondly, that statement is not as dramatic as you think. It's not saying that I hate white people, that racial preference option is the whole idea, that I prefer to date this type of race. Let's go to that argument and how it reduces couples of the same races to be a form of racism. The premise is simple. In general, wanting to date someone has a lot of factors regarding choosing that particular person. It can be as complex as interest or as superficial as your hair or skin color. Luigi already proved that this is legitimate. The nuance is that we're working under a website versus actual dating. So we see that people use these websites for the reasons of these racial preference options. How does per se a white man preferring to date a white woman become perceived as a form of racism? It highlights the idea of race being the ultimate unifying force of that relationship and undermines other factors such as experiences and common interests that make the relationship meaningful. How does their side doing that? It's an idea of creating an implication that same-race couples perpetuate racism when we already told you that racism is something different from prejudice. It is evident when we recognize that there is no golden standard for what a human relationship should be is what we're doing coming from our side. Why is this bad? Your race as people perceive as superficial can be a common ground for you to have a good relationship with that particular person on the same race. You aren't influenced by a bias that hinders you from getting to know them against that person. It gives you the ability to listen to them and to get to know them. It's the idea of you being able to relate with that one person on the common ground of your race. How does this ground the government's logic? Because they automatically assume that they are racist and they reduce them to that superficiality. We parallelize this idea of you preferring to marry someone of the same religion. You recognize you can probably get along in harmony because of this common interest. So the conclusion is simple. We cannot homogenize same-race couples as automatically racist on that basis because you undermine their relatability and you declare them racist before they actually are. And for all those reasons and more, it's very clear that the opposition side takes its fate. Thank you.
We thank the leader of opposition for his speech. He spoke for 7 minutes and 16 seconds. Now, to wrap up the substantive matter on government bench, I call on government with
In a world where discrimination does happen, in a world where different people with different skin colors make other people with different skin colors feel bad for what they're born with, we believe that we can solve this problem alongside government's bench through dating websites. Now, I'm going to clear a lot of things up that is very messy and very messed up in this debate in my 3 clashes, which is, first, what is the duty of the government? Second, who are dating websites specifically? And thirdly, is it really discriminatory? Firstly, what is the duty of the government? We already understand that the government's duty is to protect the people from whatever harm that they have, right? For example, from either from themselves or whatever other things that can bring
harm. So we do this because people like you and me pay taxes. People like you and me pay taxes to the government, and therefore the government has a social contract to protect these people. So with that logic in mind, the government has to protect that people in the sense where when discriminatory things happen, when we allow discriminatory things to happen that allow other people to feel bad, to feel to have psychological harm, to feel uncomfortable in their own skin, the government has to take a stand and has to say that no, it's wrong. So they came out and said the right to expression is important, and we agree. And we agree. But here's the catch: the problem with their policy is this: the right to expression is important, but when it comes in infringement in other people's rights, that is where we take a line. That is where we draw the line, right? So when your statement has a harm and makes other people feel bad for themselves, makes other people feel like there's a problem with themselves because they were born with this skin color, we have to say to the people, we have to prove to the people that no, this is wrong, you should not feel bad, and he should not have said that. That is why we have limitation of freedom of speech, right? That's why even in Malaysia, even in multiple countries out there, we have limitation of speech. How we say that you have the right to express yourself as long as you don't infringe on other people's rights. Because when you infringe on other people's rights, then we have the right to infringe on your right of freedom of speech. So what is the harm, right? We say that when governments do not do this, governments show that they support discrimination by the sense that, okay, this is going on, we're going to ignore it because it doesn't matter. It does, because it involves a lot of people and involves a lot of negative emotions to a person's psyche, right? So on the first level, when we don't do this, it shows that the people that you vote for, the people that is in your government, that is in your cabinet and is in your government, supports discrimination and does not protect you like they should. And in the second level, it further fuels the problem, right? Even if it doesn't fuse the problem of discrimination, the discrimination still does happen. What we want at the end of the day today is to show people that discrimination cannot happen at any place, at any time, right? And that discrimination and that prejudice should not happen, and prejudice cannot happen. Before I move on, yeah.
The directly pushes the burden the states will now support racism, but we still have things like anti-discriminatory laws on our side. But the difference is we don't actually call people racist on their preference because we don't see that they actually do something racist.
We do have anti-discriminatory law. This shows that the government does take a stand, right? But we will need to further help this people that are being racially discriminated, right, through racial preference. And they say that, and which this brings me to my second point, which is why dating websites specifically. They came out and told us, their entire bench came out and told us, right, one thing and one thing only: it's a preference and it's not discriminatory. Firstly, we agree to the fact that you can have your own preference, right? We let you do whatever we want. We're not against same-sex couples, same-sex couples, right? We're not against same-racial couples, and we're not against diversity. Diversity is great. You want to do it? Go ahead. But what we're against is that you cannot publicize what your preference is. Now, why is that? My first speaker has already told you. Firstly, when mutual preference is when we have what dating websites are, right? Because dating websites are like a media that consists of multiple people with multiple likes and dislikes, right? So when you have those type of people around, and when these social media websites are open to the general population around the world, it creates a place for you to able to connect with other people. Now, normally that is good, but when in the sense that this dating media might be the place for racist people to come in and to form another Ku Klux Klan and form another Westboro Church group. And we have to take a stand, and we have to say that this is not allowed, right? Because what these dating websites allow you to do right now is to say that in your profile, one, what you prefer, what your likes and dislikes, and secondly, what your racial preference is. Now that is bad because we already proved to you why that is bad, right? Because we don't want another Ku Klux Klan and that to wreak havoc on the world, right? And secondly, through this publicity, we show to people that there are racist people out there, there are racist people out there, and even though we allow people to use preferences, we do not want to show them, show these preferences out there, especially when it comes in the third party harm, especially when it allows other people to feel bad in their own skin, especially when it causes other people to feel uncomfortable in their own skin and are afraid to go out to another person because of their own, just because of their own racial, because of their own race, right? Before I go on, yes.
How about racial superiority? How that makes government people with radicalization? Some people have it more on your side because you're telling people that they're really white people, white couples, therefore we should abolish slavery.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? It's okay, go ahead.
It's going to talk about radicalization and defending other people because they're white, therefore they're going to be radicalized. Small people have it more on your side because you're telling other people who are going to be watching these websites that it's bad for you to say that I have preferences with whites.
It's not that firstly, when we have dating websites and when we don't allow you to choose racial preference, when you go to another profile, we are not forcing you to marry that person. You can walk away. You can press the close tab. We're not telling you, hey, let's jump to Las Vegas, let's jump a plane to Las Vegas and let's get married. No, because we allow you, even though we don't allow you to put a racial preference out there, you can still walk away from the harm, right? Because we allow you to say no to that person, just as how we allow you to date first before you get married, right? And secondly, we are not going against same racial couple, which I already proved to you multiple times, right? And thirdly, my third clash point is it really discriminatory? It doesn't matter of the intention, but what of the consequences that came. It doesn't matter if what they want is preferences, but the consequences that came with that intention is that it does harm people. And when it does harm people, it's our job, it's the job of the government, to take a stand and say, no. I already proved to you why government has taken this case and why opposition doesn't make sense, and we hope that you go with side government. Thank you.
Thanks, panelists, for a speech. It was 7 minutes and 59 seconds. Now, to wrap up substantive matter on the side of opposition plans, and I call upon opposition to hear it.
Mr. Chair, all we got from government today was a model that also perpetuated racism and a model that conceded to the harms that we gave to them and the model that just contradicted major free speech laws in every state. We think that what their side has done is that they're going to criminalize every Twitter person on Twitter, and we think that's incredibly harmful to their side. I'm going to be telling you how our arguments clashed and how ultimately their proposal doesn't work, and how the debate they debated was not necessarily relevant to the debate, it was more for the motion. So before that, the clarification. I'm going to be talking about two issues. Firstly, I'm going to be talking about whether allow users to specify their racial preferences aligned to the principles of the state. And secondly, I'm going to be talking about how preventing users to specify their racial preferences and whether it affects relationship dynamics and how it's ultimately better on our side and it's detrimental on their side. But before all of that, let's clarify the debate we debated. Because what we contend to you today is that government lost the moment they gave us their policy. Because what the Prime Minister told us was that she proposed that they're criminalizing people who are going to badmouth other races. She implicitly told us this in her second case, right? This was the wrong debate, Mr. Chair. And why was this harmful to them? Because one, it created tension in their case. Because once the moment deputy realized that that was the wrong proposal, he changed it immediately by adding this mini argument saying that we're going to allow people to walk away. What he did, Mr. Chair, was that he conceded to the harms that, walking away also perpetuates racism. That idea, Mr. Chair, just tells us that there's contradiction on their first two speakers. But secondly, they used the idea of bad-mouthing other races as a premise to reach absurd conclusions. We're talking about their conclusion of radicalization, of their conclusion of racial inferiority, where they feel that they need to be in that position too. We think that's an absurd conclusion that they derived from a proposal that wasn't even part of the debate. But even thirdly, and most importantly, even if on their best case scenario, that model is legitimate, it simply won't work because it's a major infringement of human rights of free speech. Because what they told us implicitly from their first speaker was they're going to be criminalizing anyone who puts a hate message online, on social media sites, and not just necessarily on dating sites. What that means, Mr. Chair, is that they're going to be criminalizing and punishing loads of people on Facebook, on Twitter. We don't think that's actually feasible. So my first point of clash, whether or not allowing users to specify their racial preferences and whether or not it's aligned to the principles of the state. What we brought to you today from our leader of opposition was that on his first point, people have a right to have preferences with the people they want to date. How did government attempt to clash at this point? What the Prime Minister just told us was the power of social media. A simple response to that would be simply, Mr. Chair, this doesn't clash to anything. This is just a premise. We aren't arguing that social media isn't powerful. We are actually contending that social media is powerful. So given that power, the debate then is where should we and how should we use that power of social media? We think that argument fits on both sides of the round, and therefore that argument shouldn't be counted at all because we used it ourselves as a premise. But even more so, the Prime Minister gave us her second argument on the idea that it's the duty of the government to ban offensive statements and criminalize. Mr. Chair, number one, as I've told you, it's simply not feasible to ban every single online offensive statement and find all of them. But even more so, secondly, we have to realize that there's something called free speech, right? It's the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, and we think that by allowing you to ban things that might actually benefit the state, because it's simply democratic to allow people to say what they want on the internet, we say, Mr. Chair, that what happens on their side is that you're going to ban people for reasons that aren't necessarily hateful to other people. No, thank you. Because what they tried to prove to us, and they failed on proving it to us, was that if you're going to say that I prefer white people, you're going to be actively discriminating on black people. If you're going to criminalize those people, Mr. Chair, that's simply fundamentally unfair because they're not actually being actively discriminating upon black people. They're just saying that they want white people. Therefore, Mr. Chair, we think that it's absolutely absurd for them to be able to criminalize people who aren't even discriminating on these other races. No, thank you. But my second point of clash, on whether or not preventing users to specify their racial preferences affects relationship dynamics. What our leader of opposition told you was that biases will still be there in the actual date. How did government attempt to clash this point? What the deputy told us was that harms of racial profiling will not be existent on their side because their racial preferences will not be shown. What we tell you, Mr. Chair, is that that's a mischaracterization of all the other quirks and things that you can see on dating sites, right? Because when we look at social media and dating sites, there's so many other characterizations we can see. I.e., we can see who your friends are, we can see the people who you're dating. We think, Mr. Chair, that by doing that, you're also implicitly showing the idea of you preferring a certain race over another race by just showing who you're dating and who you're able to be friends with. By showing your social circle or the people you flirt with on the internet, you're able to show your preference in that kind of level. But we think that inherently is going to be harmful to their harms, right? Because what that means, Mr. Chair, is that all the harms they presented are also present on their side. No, thank you. What's better on our side? What we tell you, Mr. Chair, is that we make people's right to display their preferences more accessible because we actually allow that outlet, and LO proved that right was incredibly important. But before sex, sure.
You said there's so many discrimination that's happening at the government, but you yourself on your bench told us that there's the anti-discrimination laws. So what's going to happen?
There are going to be anti-discrimination laws on their side, on our side too, Mr. Chair. But even more so, discrimination is probably going to happen more on their side, right? Because on their side, what they're doing by banning this, and we go back, and this leads perfectly to my second level of my analysis of my second issue, we go back to our deputy's point and how it reduces couples who are of the same race as racist. Because how it's more racist on their side is simple. And the only attempt they got to clash this point was simply supported the idea that we're going to reduce couples who are of the same sex, who are of the same race as racist. What they told us was that they're going to criminalize people who are going to say that their racial preference is of the same gender. Not gender, but of the same race, right? What that means, Mr. Chair, is that you're going to tell people that's illegitimate, that's harmful, and that's incredibly bad for you. You're going to display that this is racist and it's something we don't agree. We think that's incredibly harmful for a certain demographic of certain people who just want to be able to flirt with and to be able to interact with potential partners who are of their same race. We think that's okay, and we think that on their side, they're simply labeling them as racist. Today we brought you the idea that on their side, by proposing a policy that attempts to make things less racist, they get the complete opposite of that, and they make people more racist, and they actively discriminate upon a certain demographic that simply wants to be able to interact with people of their same race. So for all these reasons and more, I'm very glad to host this debate.
Okay, we thank opposition for the speech because of celebrating 26 seconds. And now to wrap up the opposition bench, we would like to call upon opposition advice to Ateneo.
I want to be very clear with what this debate was about, because their whole case depended upon what they thought the word racism meant. Because their idea of discrimination is that I will be offended if I see a person stating that he prefers one race over another. The thing is, and this is that some people have to accept, that individuals have to be able to accept that they cannot be able to date this person simply because he is not attracted to you. And because we have to really question, because he's and this type of difference from being, and this is really different from being offended, because it's different to like justify bringing it to court or making it a legal order to actually bring you to jail. And you look at it, if the standards of bringing someone to jail does not fit it, then that policy should fall. Am I being discriminatory to ugly people if I say that I like beautiful people? No, though I'm not saying that black people are ugly, I'm saying that external characteristics are important to my attraction and to my relationship to individuals. And if I'm able to state that in an online dating website, such that I can get the people I want, then that's something that you must allow me to do. Moreover, what then are the contentions in this debate? Firstly, when should the state ban something? And secondly, how do we stop racism? So the first one, when should the state ban something? Because they said in their own policy that they will criminalize people who have preferences because they are racist, even if it was indirect. And that was extremely soft stance that we got from government, right? Because in the same breath, they say that they're against racism, yet they're going to allow it in the real world in these different instances. They allow racial preferences. We don't think that this is going to work in their own model in like effectively changing mindsets, right? What are the responses we brought to you? Firstly, since when did the state criminalize something that was indirect racism, right? Isn't intent something that's important to actually saying that something is a crime in the first place? Even on that type of standard and what the law actually is, that own policy has to fall. But moreover, what did we tell you? This wasn't racism at all, even in the first place, because the premise they failed to respond to, and we got no response whatsoever from their side, was that attraction is not the same as prejudice. And we told you that if I'm able to say it in a website, even if it is a statement, even if that other people may be like said, maybe unable to date me in the future, then that's something we're willing to support. What was the response? They said that it's merely a statement that other third-party people are going to be offended. Our response was simple. We said that it's unrealistic anyways. Just because I'm ugly and I see that people are not going to prefer me doesn't mean that I can bring him to jail just because he's being discriminatory to me, right? We told you that preferences are important, just like in your religion, just like your gender, just like your sexual orientation, especially if you're someone that I may want to mate with or have a relationship with in the future. Anti-discrimination laws are the safeguard that we already have in the status quo to stop the external harms that you can get in their policy, such as being offended, such as these different physical abuses or emotional abuses, and say that we can be provided. And that's why we still allow racial preferences, because there's no harm that we can actually see through these different things, especially if I'm just saying that I like something. Secondly, how do we stop racism? And here's where they failed to respond to our converse burden that we brought you from DLO, which the government whip completely dismissed. We told you that the only way that when you can stop the narrative that same-race couples are together because of love and not because of their race only, then that's something we're willing to support. Yes, maybe race may be considered in the first place, but when their policy fetishizes the fact that you must always consider race in every single instance. Just because you may be being racist if you prefer someone that is not, then that's something we don't want to do. And that affects people in the dating scene and in relationships. And if you're going to hamper that in either model, we want to earn the side of caution and be able to try and protect every single individual in the situation. And in level of response and level of being able to substantive in these situations, I am very proud of folks.
We thank the opposition reply speaker for his speech. Now to wrap up for side of government, and then there's a whole report on government replies.
It's funny how side opposition got the whole case totally messed up. So just to ease their minds, just to massage their heads, I'm going to come and give you two accounts of two different users of dating websites, just to bring you what exactly is our case. So let's look at user A, who lives in a country operating under their model, which is basically sticking to status quo. So sure, these people are still allowed to use statements like, I only want black. Sure, it may, for a few years, nothing happens. Maybe people don't find it discriminatory. But the fact is, after that few years, someone who goes online, like when this black lady, when she sees this guy saying that he only wants white, there is a chance that she does take it as discriminatory towards her, even though the white guy did not intend to harm her. But look, what is the statement? Only white. The only word means that you don't want anyone else. That indirectly implies that you're against going out with any other race, that some people, if not all, some people can take it as you're discriminating against them. But let's look at our case. We told you that even though we've taken off, we don't allow them to state their racial preference. What happens then? User B finds this lady who wants to date him, but he doesn't really want that lady. Maybe because of her race. But he doesn't exactly state out that he doesn't want her because of her race. Because he will no longer have the avenue to state his racial preference. What happens? He just simply walks away, saying that, look, I don't think we're going to be compatible. Done. What happens then is that it won't be seen as racial discrimination, because you don't give a big statement saying that I don't want you because of your race. So late in the opposition whip's speech, he said that we brought up a contradiction, saying that by saying that they still can walk away is a contradiction to our whole model. The question is it a contradiction? No. Why? Because as I told you earlier, you walking away, all you're saying is that you don't think you're going to be compatible with the person you want to date. That's all you're saying. You're not saying that I don't want you because of your race. That is not a contradiction. We've had a really dismissive side opposition, because a lot of our points, how did they rebut it? They say all they said was that we assume that these people who state out such statements are racist. But does that matter? Does it matter or not whether these people are racist? We told you that the important thing is that other people are going to think that there are some people who can take it as discrimination against them, because everyone thinks differently. Who are side opposition to say that this statement won't cause discrimination? Why? Because as much as everyone thinks differently, there is going to be one or two who take it as discrimination against them. We told you why. We implicitly say race, they cannot state their race. Because racist issues are very sensitive, even in this world. In Malaysia, we don't allow you to state discriminatory-ish statements about other races. It's the same thing, because a small statement, even if it's just I only want this race, can still cause a big impact upon other people, even if you did not intend. So what about the issues in the debate? We argued about whether the state can take away your freedom of expression. All they said was we should just allow them to have their right to express this. But we told you the state can take away your right when there is going to be a harm. A harm implied, even though you did not intend to cause harm, that harm can still happen because as much as everyone thinks differently, they can still take it as discriminatory and hurt their psychology. What happens then? The state has to move in and stop this to ensure the harmony for its people. For all these reasons, go outside government.
Besides the government reply for speech, the debate is now over. Let's then go into the debate.